The Chicago skyline glittered that night, a sea of a million tiny lights under a moonless, inky black sky. Up on the 25th floor of the prestigious Lakeview Tower, the city looked like a carpet of diamonds. It was a view worth a fortune. Arthur Vance had worked his entire life to earn it. He stood on the balcony, a gentle breeze rustling his hair. He was a man who had everything: a successful business, a beautiful wife, Eleanor, and a daughter, Chloe, who was his whole world. He took a slow, deep breath of the cool night air, completely unaware that it would be his last. It was a perfect night, until it wasn't. Behind him, the glass door slid open silently. Eleanor stepped out. Her designer dress shimmered in the faint city light. She walked toward him, her high heels making no sound on the expensive tile. She placed a hand on his back, a gesture he had felt 1,000 times, but this time, it was different. There was no warmth in her touch, no love, only a cold, hard resolve. She leaned in close, her lips near his ear, and whispered something only he would hear. A final, chilling goodbye. Then, with a sudden, violent shove, she pushed him forward. It was a betrayal as swift as it was brutal. Arthur's world turned upside down. One moment he was admiring the city he loved, the next he was tumbling into the abyss. The glittering lights rushed up to meet him in a dizzying, terrifying blur. There was no time to scream, no time to understand, just the sickening feeling of falling, of air whipping past him, of life being snatched away in a single, heart-stopping instant. The fall was a long one, 25 stories. A long time to think about the hand that had pushed him, the face he had trusted, the love he thought was real. The city below, once a symbol of his success, became the instrument of his end. Down on the street, a sudden shocking thud broke the nightly rhythm of the city. A few passers-by stopped, their faces a mixture of confusion and horror. What was that sound? They looked around, searching for the source, and then they saw it. A shape on the pavement that shouldn't be there. A life, extinguished in a moment of unimaginable violence. Up above, on the 25th floor balcony, Eleanor stood alone. She looked down, her face a mask of stone. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry, she simply watched, a silent observer to the tragedy she had orchestrated. The plan was in motion, and she was sure, absolutely sure, she would get away with it. The police arrived to a scene of carefully staged sorrow. Eleanor Vance, the grieving widow. She was a portrait of devastation. Her mascara was smudged, her hands trembled, her voice was a fragile whisper. She told the officers a heartbreaking story. Arthur had been despondent, she said, worried about his business, struggling with pressures he kept hidden from the world. She had tried to help him, she sobbed, but he pushed her away. She had just stepped inside to get him a glass of water when she heard the silence, the terrible, empty silence. She rushed back out, she explained, her voice cracking, and he was gone. It was a tragic accident, a terrible choice he had made. Detectives listened, their faces etched with professional sympathy. It was a story they had heard before. High-powered executive, immense stress, a moment of despair. The penthouse was immaculate, no signs of a struggle. Eleanor's performance was flawless. She clung to a framed photo of her and Arthur, their smiles frozen in happier times. She spoke of their love, their dreams, the future that had been cruelly stolen from them. She offered them drinks, answered every question with a tearful, wavering voice. She was playing the role of her life, and she was convinced she was earning an Oscar for it. She was the picture of a woman shattered by loss. In the days that followed, Eleanor maintained her public facade of a heartbroken widow. Dressed in elegant black, she greeted mourners at the funeral, accepting their condolences with a sad, distant smile. She spoke of Arthur's generosity, his kindness, his love for his family. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. She was already meeting with lawyers, financial advisors. She was liquidating Arthur's assets, transferring funds, securing the fortune she now controlled. The grief was a costume she wore, and she couldn't wait to take it off. The money, after all, was her real comfort. It was the prize she had been willing to kill for. The authorities saw no reason to doubt her story. The preliminary investigation concluded that Arthur Vance's death was a suicide. The case was closed. Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief. It had worked. All the planning, the acting, the cold-blooded nerve, it had all paid off. She was free, and she was rich. Incredibly rich. She could finally have the life she always believed she deserved. A life of luxury, without the inconvenience of a husband. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, looking down at the city below. It was all hers now. She had won. Or so she thought. Chloe Vance arrived home from college to a house that felt cold and empty. Her father, her hero, was gone. The official story was suicide, but it didn't sit right with her. Not at all. Her father was a fighter. He loved life, he loved his work, and more than anything, he loved her. The idea that he would willingly leave it all behind felt wrong, like a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. She watched her mother, Eleanor, drift through the massive apartment like a ghost. Eleanor spoke of grief, but her eyes were dry. She talked about missing Arthur, but she was already planning a trip to Europe. It was all too fast, too neat. The first crack in Eleanor's story appeared during a casual conversation. Chloe was sorting through her father's old records, a wave of nostalgia washing over her. She mentioned to Eleanor how much he had been looking forward to their planned fishing trip next month. Eleanor's face went blank for a second. "Oh, that," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "He was going to cancel it. He hadn't been himself for weeks, darling. So much pressure." But Chloe knew that wasn't true. Her father had called her just 2 days before he died, his voice bubbling with excitement about the new fishing gear he had bought. He wasn't a man planning to end his life. He was a man planning for the future. Suspicion, once planted, began to grow like a weed in Chloe's mind. She started noticing other things. Small inconsistencies, strange behaviors. Eleanor had claimed Arthur was worried about the business, but Chloe found a recent quarterly report on his desk. Profits were up. The company was thriving. Eleanor had said he was withdrawn and depressed, but his calendar was filled with upcoming meetings, dinner reservations with friends, and a reminder for Chloe's birthday. These weren't the actions of a man in despair. They were the plans of a man with everything to live for. The beautiful picture of grief her mother had painted was starting to fray at the edges. The biggest red flag came when Chloe tried to access her father's personal laptop. He had always told her the password, a combination of her birthday and their childhood pet's name. But when she tried it, the screen flashed incorrect password. She tried again and again. Nothing. She asked Eleanor about it. "Oh, he must have changed it," Eleanor said casually, barely looking up from a fashion magazine. "He was getting so paranoid about security lately." The excuse was too easy, too quick. Chloe felt a shiver run down her spine. Why would her father change a password he had shared with her? And why did her mother seem so unconcerned? Someone was hiding something. The funeral was a blur of black suits, hushed whispers, and meaningless platitudes. "He's in a better place," people said. But Chloe knew her father's place was here, with her. As she stood by his gravesite, a cold resolve settled over her. She looked at the fresh mound of earth, the polished coffin below, and she made a silent promise. "I'll find out what happened, Dad," she whispered, the words carried away by the wind. "I promise." This wasn't just grief anymore. It was a mission. She would not let her father's memory be tarnished by a lie. She would find the truth, no matter how ugly it was, and no matter where it led. Her investigation began in the one place she felt close to him, his home office. It was a sanctuary of leather-bound books, polished wood, and the faint scent of his cologne. Eleanor had forbidden her from going in there, claiming it was too painful. But Chloe waited until her mother was out on one of her increasingly frequent shopping sprees and slipped inside. The room was just as he had left it. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk. Pens were arranged in a cup. It was a space of order and logic, the complete opposite of the chaos that had consumed their lives. She felt a pang of sadness, but pushed it down. She had work to do. She started sifting through his papers, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Invoices, contracts, emails. At first, it was all business as usual, but then she found a folder tucked away in a bottom drawer, labeled Personal Finances. Inside were documents she didn't understand at first. Bank statements, insurance policies. She noticed a new life insurance policy, one taken out just 3 months before his death. The beneficiary was listed as Eleanor Vance. The payout was enormous. A chill went through her. It was a lot of money. Enough money to be a motive. Was this the pressure her mother had been talking about? A pressure to cash in? The more she looked, the more she found. She discovered statements from a joint savings account that had been systematically emptied over the past 6 months. Thousands of dollars, withdrawn in cash, week after week. Where had all that money gone? She also found credit card statements in Eleanor's name, filled with extravagant purchases. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, spa treatments. It was a level of spending that seemed reckless, almost desperate. Her father had been methodical with money. This was anything but. It was a pattern of greed. And it was all pointing in one direction, toward her mother. The woman who was supposed to love him. Locked out of her father's laptop, Chloe felt she had hit a wall. The password was a digital key, and without it, a part of her father's final days remained hidden. She remembered her dad mentioning a trusted IT consultant he used for his business, a young tech whiz named Ben. She found his number in her father's old-fashioned Rolodex. With a trembling hand, she made the call. She explained the situation, her voice low, telling Ben she just wanted to retrieve some family photos. She didn't dare mention her suspicions. Not yet. Ben, who had admired Arthur, agreed to help. He told her to bring the laptop to his small workshop across town. Ben's workshop was a chaotic maze of wires, monitors, and half-disassembled computers. He took the laptop and got to work. Chloe watched, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. What would they find? Or worse, what if they found nothing? Hours ticked by. Ben typed furiously, his face illuminated by lines of code on the screen. "Your dad had some serious encryption on here," he muttered. "But your mom was sloppy." He explained that the password had been changed from an IP address traced back to Eleanor's new tablet, the one she bought the day after the funeral. The new password was simple, almost insulting. Freedom 1. With a final click, the laptop screen flickered to life, revealing her father's desktop. It was like seeing a ghost. His familiar background, a picture of him and Chloe on a fishing boat, smiled back at her. Ben, sensing she needed a moment, quietly stepped away. Chloe's hands shook as she navigated the files. She opened his email. And there it was, a draft email, unsent, addressed to his lawyer. The subject line read, "Divorce Proceedings." Her breath caught in her throat. She read the words her father had written just hours before he died. He wrote about Eleanor's reckless spending, her emotional distance, and his discovery of a secret bank account she had been funding. The email was a bombshell. It laid out everything. "I believe she only married me for my money," Arthur had written. "I can no longer live this lie. I need to end the marriage before she ruins me completely." He had attached scans of the secret bank statements he had found. It was all there, in black and white. The motive, the betrayal, the truth. Her father hadn't been suicidal. He had been taking back control of his life. And Eleanor must have known. She must have realized her golden ticket was about to be canceled. Tears streamed down Chloe's face, not of sadness, but of vindication, and of rage. Her father hadn't jumped, he was pushed. Armed with the unsent email and the bank statements, Chloe knew she couldn't go to the police alone. They had already closed the case. They would see her as a grieving daughter, lost in conspiracy theories. She needed more. She needed something undeniable. Her mind raced back to the night of her father's death. Eleanor had claimed she was inside getting water when it happened. But the penthouse was a smart home. Arthur was obsessed with technology. Everything, the lights, the sound system, the security cameras, was connected. And Chloe knew he had installed a small, discreet security camera on the balcony after a neighbor had a break-in. Finding the camera's footage was the next challenge. The system was designed to store data in the cloud, but the account was linked to our father's email, which she could now access. She logged into the security system's portal, her heart hammering against her ribs. She navigated to the archives, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. She selected the date, October 9th, 2025. And the time, just before the official time of death. She clicked play. The video began to load, the spinning wheel on the screen feeling like an eternity. She held her breath, praying the camera had been working, praying it had captured the truth. The footage was grainy, shot from a high angle, but it was clear. It showed her father standing on the balcony, looking out at the city. The image was peaceful, serene. Then, the sliding door opens. Eleanor walks out. Chloe watched, her stomach churning, as her mother approached her father. She saw her place a hand on his back. She saw her lean in to whisper something, and then she saw it. The push. It wasn't a stumble or an accident. It was a deliberate, forceful shove. She watched in horror as her father's body went over the railing, disappearing from view. The video kept rolling. It showed Eleanor standing there, calm and composed, before turning and walking back inside. The truth was more horrific than she could have ever imagined. Seeing it with her own eyes, watching her mother murder her father, broke something inside her. A choked sob escaped her lips. This was the undeniable proof. The final piece of the puzzle. She saved the file, her mind a whirlwind of grief and fury. She looked at the woman on the screen, the woman who had tucked her in at night, the woman who was supposed to protect their family. And all she saw was a monster. There was no more doubt, no more suspicion, only the cold, hard certainty of what she had to do next. Her mother was a murderer, and she was going to make sure the whole world knew it. Chloe walked into the police station the next day. She was no longer just a grieving daughter. She was an instrument of justice. She calmly asked to speak with the lead detective on her father's case. When he met her, his expression was one of weary patience, expecting another emotional plea. But Chloe didn't cry. She simply placed a USB drive on the table between them. "My father didn't jump," she said, her voice steady and clear. "He was pushed. And this is the proof." She told him everything. The faked grief, the financial motives, the locked laptop, and finally, the horrifying video from the balcony camera. The detective watched the video in stunned silence. The mask of professional detachment fell away, replaced by a look of shock and grim understanding. The grainy footage told a story far more sinister than the one they had accepted. It was cold-blooded murder, captured on camera. The case was immediately reopened. This time, the focus was not on a grieving widow, but on a calculating killer. When the police arrived at the penthouse to arrest Eleanor Vance, she was in the middle of packing for her European getaway. Her face, a mask of surprise and indignation, quickly crumbled when she was shown the video. The game was over. The trial was a media sensation. The story of the beautiful gold digger wife and the daughter who brought her to justice captivated the city. Chloe had to endure the agony of testifying against her own mother, of watching the video of her father's last moments played over and over again in the courtroom. She stood strong, her voice never wavering as she detailed her investigation and her mother's web of lies. She did it for her father. The jury's verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty of first-degree murder. Eleanor Vance, the woman who thought she had gotten away with the perfect crime, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the end, justice was served. But for Chloe, there was no celebration, only a quiet, profound sadness. She had lost both her parents, one to a tragic death, the other to an even more tragic truth. Standing on that same balcony, now a place of sorrow and memory, she looked out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights still glittered, but they looked different now. They were a reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight, of the devastating cost of greed. She had kept her promise to her father. She had found the truth. And in doing so, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The path ahead would be long, but she would walk it, carrying her father's love as her guide.